When a quiet boy enters a new classroom clutching a tattered flip phone, what begins as a simple curiosity soon unravels into a race against time, exposing a hidden struggle that threatens to tear apart everything he's ever known. This is a story of betrayal, resilience, and the relentless fight for justice. Let us know where you're watching from, and if you believe the truth must always be heard, be sure to like and subscribe for more. Mrs. Darrow closed her laptop as the last echo of her recorded greeting faded, then took a breath and stared out across her classroom. Rows of neat desks rested under the glow of overhead lights. Outside, morning sun sliced through the narrow windows, illuminating dust motes that drifted in the stale September air. It was the start of the school year, and she should have felt the usual excitement. A new wave of children, new personalities, new possibilities. Yet, a creeping sense of tension had followed her the entire weekend, shadowing her every thought. Maybe it was just nerves. She'd never been entirely calm when meeting a new class. She was an experienced teacher at Larkspur Elementary, but she remembered distinctly what her own mother used to say about teaching. No 2 years are the same. No two groups of children are the same. They'll always surprise you, for better or worse. Typically, the first day had a sense of possibility. A fresh start, bright eyes, sharpened pencils. But from the moment she saw Eli that morning, something felt different. Eli was a newly transferred foster child, 10 years old, with hair too long around his ears and eyes that seemed to shy away from everything around him. He slipped into the classroom, glancing over his shoulder as though expecting someone to snatch him back into the hallway. Nervous children were common on the first day, especially transfers, yet there was more to it with him. Mrs. Darrow remembered how her gaze settled on his left wrist, noticing the phone at once. It was strapped to him like a lifeline, a scratched-up flip phone that looked older than some of the textbooks in the building. She hovered near the classroom door, greeting each student with a smile and a soft, "Good morning." When Eli passed, she tried the same warm approach. He managed a barely audible "so" before quickly averting his gaze. The boy walked straight to a desk near the second row, head down, shoulders hunched. Mrs. Darrow briefly wondered if she should approach him, but she decided not to push too hard. There would be time enough later to ease him into conversation or group activities. As the students settled, she directed them to hang their backpacks on their chairs or place them neatly at the side of the classroom. A gentle current of excitement ran through the children's chatter. Some were reuniting after a summer apart, others introduced themselves to new classmates, and a few simply rummaged for pens and notebooks. Eli, however, sat stiff and silent, hugging his backpack in his lap. Mrs. Darrow couldn't miss how he guarded that small plastic phone on his wrist as though the entire world depended on it. The rubber band that secured it was ragged, possibly snapped and knotted back together multiple times. She sensed a story behind that phone, but she didn't know yet what it might be. Once everyone was settled and the usual roll call began, she took a moment to more formally introduce herself and outline the basic rules. Respect each other, raise your hand before speaking, no cell phones during class. A wave of laughter passed among a few students at the mention of phones. Some had brand new smartphones in their backpacks, while others used school-approved tablets from last year. Eli, though, didn't react. Mrs. Darrow didn't have the heart to single him out for having that old phone on his wrist. She couldn't guess whether it even worked. It seemed ancient. She started the day's lesson with a simple, getting to know you activity. Most children wrote short paragraphs about their hobbies or favorite summer memories. The hum of pencils scratching paper filled the room. Every so often, she strolled between the desks, glancing at their work. When she neared Eli, she saw that he'd barely written a single sentence. Instead, he had a small, intricately sketched border around the paper's edge, trees with twisted trunks, as though he were trying to conjure a forest. He was an artist, it seemed. She leaned in gently. "That's a beautiful drawing," she said. "If you'd like to write just a few sentences about yourself, that's enough for today." He nodded slowly, as if every movement caused him pain. She didn't press him further. After some moments, he finally wrote a few words. Mrs. Darrow didn't see what they were, but he took great care in forming each letter. Then he dropped his pencil. The phone on his wrist jostled, and for a split second he frantically reached out to steady it, almost toppling from his chair. Mrs. Darrow's concern mounted, but she let it pass without comment. When the bell rang for recess, the children burst into the hallway, excited to race toward the playground. Eli, in contrast, stood uncertainly by his desk, hugging his backpack again. The other kids didn't pay him much attention. Most of them were too caught up in their own excitement. Mrs. Darrow approached him slowly, mindful not to startle him. "Eli, would you like to go play outside with everyone else?" she asked, her tone gentle. He looked down at the floor. "I'm okay," he said. "I'd rather stay here." "You sure? You might have fun." I'll stay if that's all right," he mumbled. She sighed. It was only the first day, so perhaps he just needed time to adjust. "Of course you can. I'll be here getting some paperwork sorted." He nodded, moving to sit back at his desk. She noticed how tightly he clung to the backpack. Somewhere deep inside, her teacher instincts began to whisper that something about his behavior wasn't just normal shyness. Children in foster care sometimes carried trauma or fear that manifested in small, subtle ways, and she had seen plenty in her years. But this was more acute. His entire posture radiated tension, as if expecting an attack at any moment. No child should feel that way on their first day of school. When lunch period arrived, Eli did the same thing. He refused to leave the classroom. Mrs. Darrow insisted he at least walk to the cafeteria with the other children so he could get a meal. She convinced him to bring his backpack, noticing how he cradled it like a stuffed animal. Even in the cafeteria, he chose a table in the corner, far from the rest. While the others shrieked and laughed, trading half-eaten snacks and sweets, Eli sat alone, phone on the table, occasionally glancing at the empty screen. Mrs. Darrow decided to give him a little distance. She introduced herself to the other new students and made conversation, but her gaze kept drifting back to Eli. The phone was a puzzle she couldn't quite shake. At one point, she saw him gently lift the back panel of it, just a crack, as if checking something. Then he sealed it again, pressing it with anxious care. By the time she walked over to see if he needed help opening his milk carton, he'd tucked the phone under the fold of his sleeve, blocking it from sight. "Eli, you doing okay?" she asked. He nodded again without meeting her eyes. "You can tell me if something's bothering you," she said softly, placing a gentle hand on the table, not on him. She had learned that some children with traumatic histories disliked physical touch if they didn't initiate it themselves. He offered a tiny smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I'm fine." She nodded, deciding not to press further for the time being. That afternoon, as the children left for the day, Mrs. Darrow spied a tall man with a stern expression standing by the school's glass doors. He wore a drab button-down shirt tucked into khaki pants. He looked more like a rigid official than a parent. He was scanning the faces of kids passing by, his forehead creased with impatience. She guessed it must be Eli's foster parent. Sure enough, Eli spotted the man and went pale. With a sudden jerk, the boy slung his backpack over his shoulder and scurried out of the classroom. As soon as he reached the man, he tried to shrink behind him, but there was no warmth in the man's expression. Mrs. Darrow watched from a distance, alarm bells quietly ringing in her mind. The man, Mr. Halston, she presumed, didn't smile or offer comfort, just checked his watch as if evaluating whether Eli had caused him to waste time. The next day, Mrs. Darrow decided that if Eli remained distant, she might need the school counselor's expertise. She had a professional duty to be watchful. The morning's chaos unfolded as usual. Some kids forgot their pencils, others boasted about what they'd had for breakfast, and a few lagged behind, slowly wandering into the classroom. Eli was punctual, but he looked exhausted, like he hadn't slept well. The phone was there on his wrist as always. Midway through class, a thunderstorm rattled the windows. The sky dimmed unexpectedly, causing the lights in the hallway to flicker. The storm's timing was unfortunate. It unsettled even the more confident students, who whispered about lightning and the booming thunder that rattled overhead. Eli nearly bolted from his chair at the first flash. He pressed one hand against his chest, the other firmly on the phone, wide-eyed. Mrs. Darrow paused in her reading lesson and spoke calmly. "Everyone, let's take a deep breath. It's just a storm. We're perfectly safe here in the building." While most students tried to quell their jitters, Eli trembled visibly. When the second flash of lightning lit up the windows, he flinched so hard his chair screeched across the floor. Mrs. Darrow's heart twisted. She managed to guide the class through a short, calming exercise, closing their eyes, focusing on their breathing. Eli tried to comply, but his face was scrunched in distress. Even after the thunder moved off in the distance, the boy couldn't seem to shake the tension in his body. Later that day, when students were allowed a short free reading period, one of Eli's classmates, a boy named Oliver, stumbled into Eli's desk by accident. He tripped over a stray pencil box and fell forward. Books and pencils went flying. The old flip phone clattered onto the tile floor. Eli let out a shrill cry, pure fear slicing through the air. Everyone in the room froze. His reaction was so intense that even Oliver, who had only been clumsy, was startled. "I'm so sorry," Oliver managed to say. "I didn't mean." Eli scrambled for the phone, scooping it up like it was a living thing he had to protect. Tears welled in his eyes, and he began muttering apologies, countless apologies. Mrs. Darrow rushed to his side, kneeling so she was at eye level. She tried to lay a hand gently on his shoulder, but he recoiled. She stayed still, heart pounding. "It's okay," she soothed. "No harm done. You're not in trouble and neither is Oliver." He closed his eyes tight and repeated, I'm sorry," over and over until Mrs. Darrow promised him, as calmly as she could, that it wasn't his fault. Slowly, the class resumed its hum, albeit more subdued. Oliver kept a distance, looking guilty. Mrs. Darrow knew that meltdown was more than just a child overreacting to a small mishap. It spoke of real trauma. She made a mental note, with more urgency this time, to talk to the school counselor. There was a story behind Eli's anxiety, and it was obviously bigger than simple first-day jitters. That evening, she typed up a thorough email, listing the concerning behaviors she'd seen, the flinches, the phone obsession, the meltdown. She requested a session for Eli with the counselor, Miss Shepard, a kind but no-nonsense professional who had a knack for connecting with vulnerable kids. Then Mrs. Darrow drove home, still unsettled. She wanted to do more, but teachers had boundaries they couldn't cross without professional guidance. She reminded herself that she was doing everything she could, that it was only day 2, and there was a process in place. She just had to trust that process. Though trust was never easy when a child was clearly in pain. Over the next week, Miss Shepard tried several gentle approaches to encourage Eli to talk. The first time, the boy resisted, barely uttering a word. The second session, he divulged something simple. He had trouble sleeping. The third session, Miss Shepard offered him crayons and asked if he wanted to draw something about how he felt. He drew a shape resembling a house with bars on the windows, though he never said what it represented. Miss Shepard, concerned, relayed all this to Mrs. Darrow in careful terms. They both decided to proceed cautiously. The phone, however, loomed like a silent figure in all of Miss Shepard's notes. Eli refused to let it go or even put it in his pocket. It stayed strapped to his wrist at all times. One afternoon, Miss Shepard finally managed to steer the conversation toward the phone. Eli was staring down at it, tapping a finger against the scuffed plastic, when she asked, "Do you have someone you want to call, Eli?" He didn't look up, just pressed his lips together. Eventually, he murmured, "It's in case she calls." "Who is she?" He swallowed hard, taking so long to answer that Miss Shepard thought he might not speak at all. Then, in a voice almost too soft to hear, he said, "My mom." That same day, Miss Shepard brought the snippet of conversation to Mrs. Darrow. "He said it's for his mother," the counselor explained. "This phone has no SIM card. It's basically a paperweight, but he believes she might call him on it." Mrs. Darrow frowned. "Or he hopes, maybe. Did he say anything else?" "Only that he'll keep it close until she calls to let him know he's safe. It's unclear what that means. He's given me almost no details, but it's telling that he said safe." Miss Shepard looked troubled. "His file says his mother's out of the picture, with no known contact information. He's been in multiple placements in the last year, apparently none lasted long." Mrs. Darrow recalled how quickly Halston had pulled him out of the building the first day and how frightened Eli had seemed. "He must have had some traumatic experiences," she said softly. "Yes," Miss Shepard agreed. We need more information. I can only do so much if he won't open up. But I'm going to keep trying. While Ms. Shepherd continued to gently coax details from him, Mrs. Darrow found herself constantly watching over the boy in class. He never lied, never acted out, never caused trouble. If anything, he was too well behaved, raising his hand timidly before asking permission for small, insignificant things. Several times he asked if he could go to the bathroom just to check the phone or rewrap the rubber band. She didn't stop him. She saw how the other children mostly left him alone. His quiet presence drew no major bullying, but also no real friendship. He was set apart. A few days later, the incident that changed everything occurred. The school scheduled a surprise fire drill. The alarm blared mid-morning, startling both staff and students. Teachers calmly tried to usher their classes outside to the designated safety zones. Children scurried to line up, leaving backpacks and materials behind, just as they'd practiced. But outside in the crisp air, Mrs. Darrow scanned her group and realized with a jolt that Eli looked on the verge of panic. He was darting glances back at the building. "My backpack," he whispered frantically. "I left it." Mrs. Darrow gave him a reassuring nod. "It's just a drill, sweetheart. Your backpack will be fine. We'll be back inside shortly." His eyes filled with tears. "No, you can't let anyone touch it. Please don't let them take my phone." The alarm eventually cut off, and Mrs. Darrow led the children back in. Eli ran ahead, ignoring the usual safety protocol. He shot straight for the classroom door. Mrs. Darrow tried to call him back, but he was determined, and she had to follow. Inside the classroom, she noticed his backpack lying on one of the desks near the front. Mrs. Darrow herself had grabbed it earlier in the rush. Eli stopped dead, horror on his face, and turned to Mrs. Darrow as though she had committed some grave betrayal. "You touched it?" he breathed, voice tight. She glanced at the bag, then at him. "I'm sorry, Eli. I wanted to make sure it wasn't in anyone's way during the drill." "It's okay." He looked ready to cry again, and yet also like he wanted to lash out or run. Torn between flight and despair, he approached the backpack gingerly, as if it might be booby-trapped. Mrs. Darrow's own heart clenched at the sight. She took a step closer, trying to calm him. "Eli, honey, it's safe. I just put it on my desk. No one opened it." But it was too late. He unzipped a side pocket to reveal the battered flip phone, turning it over in his hands. The rubber band had snapped, the two ragged ends dangling. Mrs. Darrow saw the heartbreak that flickered in his eyes, and something in her chest hurt. He started breathing rapidly, almost hyperventilating, as he gently pried open the phone's battery compartment to check inside. He pressed it shut just as quickly, letting out a shaky sigh, relieved. Seeing him that rattled only intensified her worry. He insisted on leaving class early that day, complaining of a headache. Mrs. Darrow walked him to the nurse's office, still shaken by how deep his anxiety ran. By the time she returned to an empty classroom after all the students had gone home, she couldn't focus on anything but the memory of his trembling hands, his wide, panicked eyes. She sat heavily in her chair, faced with the truth that no standard approach might help him. Something truly dire lurked behind his fear. As soon as she got home that evening, she called Ms. Shepherd directly. "We need to figure out more," she said. "I'm worried about him. This isn't typical." "I'm with you," Ms. Shepherd replied, her tone grim. "Let me see if he'll talk to me again tomorrow. The administration gave me permission to spend some extra one-on-one time with him." "Thank you," Mrs. Darrow said, letting out the breath she'd been holding. The next day was overcast, a drizzling rain tapping against the classroom windows. Miss Shepherd summoned Eli during reading time. Mrs. Darrow watched him leave, phone hidden under his sleeve once more. She had a quiet word with Miss Shepherd later in the teacher's lounge. "He told me the phone is in case she calls," Miss Shepherd murmured, voice low so no one else would overhear. "He says, she said she might call if I'm ever safe." "Does he mean his mother?" Mrs. Darrow asked, though she already suspected the answer. "Yes," Miss Shepherd said, pressing her lips into a line. "He's absolutely convinced she's out there, trying to reach him. But his file states she's absent, status unknown. There's no contact number listed. He's had no visits or letters." And you know how it is with foster placements, these kids move around. She might not even know where he is. Mrs. Darrow leaned against the wall. It's heartbreaking to think he's clinging to this phone, hoping for a call that can't come. Yes, Miss Shepherd agreed. But I'm also alarmed by his references to safe. He's implied that his mother left him with instructions about that phone, but the details are fuzzy. He's being evasive, or maybe he's just too scared to talk. Mrs. Darrow's mind flicked back to that meltdown over the phone dropping. This was no typical separation anxiety. There was an urgent sense of desperation behind his actions. She decided not to wait. That very evening, once her grading was done, she took a deep breath and opened the battered phone's brand imprint online, searching to see if it held any clue. Of course, she quickly realized that was a dead end. Without the actual phone in her possession, she couldn't glean the hidden secrets inside. She also knew it was deeply unethical to rummage through a child's personal item, unless that child might be in danger. Still, she was uncertain. For now, all she could do was keep an eye on him, keep Miss Shepherd informed, and wait for the next sign. The sign arrived soon enough. 2 days later, the school's power flickered during the tail end of a thunderstorm, sending a surge through the building that tripped the alarms momentarily. Students were again ushered to line up, but this time it wasn't a drill. The power needed checking, so the staff had them all wait in the hallway for 10 minutes while maintenance workers fiddled with the circuit breakers. In the confusion, Eli's backpack got knocked from its hook by a jostling wave of children. Mrs. Darrow herself saw it happen and scooped it up, promising to return it to him. But by the time she reached his side in the hallway, he was close to tears once more. "I have your backpack right here, Eli," she said softly, handing it over. He almost snatched it from her, hugging it. The phone was presumably inside. When the lights came back on, and the staff led them all into the classroom, she saw that Eli was trembling. That was when the unthinkable urge to look inside gripped Mrs. Darrow. She told herself it would be a terrible breach of trust, that she couldn't rummage through a child's belongings. But something about his behavior, that terror, was more than typical fear. She wondered if the phone might contain a note or something that would reveal the truth. She wrestled with her conscience. Ultimately, she did nothing that day. She let him keep his backpack, unsearched. Guilt and worry warred in her heart. But 2 days later, destiny decided for her. The school's fire alarm malfunctioned again, faulty wiring from the earlier storm. This time, it caused a real wave of panic among the children. They evacuated quickly, leaving behind everything. Mrs. Darrow stayed behind to ensure no one was left in the room. She spotted Eli's backpack on a chair. He must have been so frightened by the blaring alarm that he forgot it. She grabbed it, intending to bring it to him outside. Moments later, in the chaos of the hallway, she found Eli clutching Miss Shepherd's arm, tears in his eyes, sputtering about not wanting the phone to be destroyed. Mrs. Darrow held out the backpack, feeling relief for an instant, that he would see it was safe and calm down. But when he saw her with it, his face contorted into panic. He begged her not to touch it, not to open the pockets or do anything with it. But his entreaties only fueled her alarm. She wondered what was so critical inside that would cause him such debilitating fear. She tried to reassure him that she hadn't opened it, that it was safe in her hands. Yet, as the classes returned inside, chaos still reigned in the hallway. A few parents who'd come early for volunteer duties milled about. The principal was trying to make an announcement. In the confusion, Mrs. Darrow found herself standing near her desk, holding Eli's backpack. He was in the corridor, speaking to Miss Shepherd. She noticed how the zipper on the side pocket was halfway open. A strange impulse overcame her. She told herself she needed to see what was inside for his own safety. She unclasped the side pocket softly, glancing over her shoulder to make sure no one was watching. She didn't intend to rummage, just to see if something dangerous or revealing was in there. The phone slid out easily into her hand, a battered flip phone, screen so scratched it might never have lit up in a decade. It clearly had no battery inside, or if it did, it was completely dead. Guilt pricked at her. But she justified it as a teacher's responsibility, perhaps a moral obligation. If there was more to his predicament, maybe it lay hidden here. She turned the phone over, feeling her pulse hammer. The back panel had a piece of tape along one edge as though sealing it shut. Slowly, she eased her thumbnail under the tape. It popped free, revealing the empty battery compartment. But it wasn't empty. Wedged beneath where the battery should have been was a folded piece of lined paper, carefully taped to the plastic. Heart pounding, she slid it out. It read, in small, shaky handwriting, "This is my son Eli. If you find this, please call me. I don't know where they placed him. I'm trying to get him back. Please help. Marissa." At the bottom was a 10-digit phone number, no last name or address. Mrs. Darrow felt the hairs on her arms stand on end. She carefully replaced the note and resealed the tape, her mind racing. Eli's mother was out there, somewhere, trying to track him down. That phone was his hope, the tether to the idea that someone loved him and wanted him. Mrs. Darrow swallowed hard. This changed everything. It proved that Eli's mother was not a distant memory. She was actively searching for him. Why had no one told him? Why was she missing from the official narrative? She slid the phone back into the pocket and zipped it. Only then did she realize her hands were shaking. She looked up to find Eli watching from the classroom doorway, tears brimming in his eyes. He stared at her with an expression of betrayal, like he knew, even if he hadn't actually seen her with the phone open. She tried to steady her breath, but she couldn't calm her pounding heart. At that moment, Miss Shepherd poked her head in, oblivious to the tension. "Is everything okay in here?" Mrs. Darrow gave a quick nod, though she doubted she looked calm. "We're fine. Just," she faltered for words. Eli forgot his backpack in the scramble. Miss Shepherd beckoned for him, but he lingered in the doorway, hugging the bag to his chest once Mrs. Darrow handed it over. She felt a pang of guilt, aware that in his eyes, she had crossed a line. Still, what she had discovered was too important. She resolved to speak with Miss Shepherd privately. That evening, once the school was empty, she showed Miss Shepherd the note. The counselor's face registered shock and worry in equal measure. They agreed they had to notify CPS at once. Miss Shepherd made the call, detailing the mother's note, the phone, and Eli's behavior. That set off a chain reaction. Social workers asked for the contact number, promising to investigate. In theory, it should have been a moment of relief, that professionals would handle it. But something about the conversation left a sour taste in Mrs. Darrow's mouth. The social worker on the phone seemed weary, overburdened, and non-committal. Bureaucracy had its own sluggish pace, and children sometimes fell through the cracks if there wasn't enough immediate evidence of danger. Mrs. Darrow didn't want to wait. She took down the phone number, copying it carefully from the note. After finishing her conversation with Miss Shepherd, she drove home. She cooked a meal out of habit more than hunger, her mind churning with possibilities. Could Marissa be an unfit mother spinning a sob story? Could she be telling the truth? Eli's behavior suggested real anguish, not manipulation. Still, she knew from experience that these cases weren't always straightforward. The more she thought about how terrified Eli had been, and the note's desperate tone, the more she felt compelled to find answers herself. Eventually, she mustered the courage to dial the number on her cell phone. The call went straight to voicemail. She left a short message, voice trembling slightly. "Hello, my name is... I'm calling about Eli. I'm a teacher at Larkspur Elementary. Please call me back." She didn't mention the note, worried that might scare the person away if they were suspicious. Then she hung up and stared at the screen, as if expecting it to ring immediately. It didn't. The next day, Miss Shepherd informed her that a social worker had tried calling the same number, only to get a voicemail again. They left a more official message. So the wait began. But a few hours later, while Mrs. Darrow was in the middle of distributing worksheets, her phone vibrated quietly in her pocket. She couldn't answer then and there, but she saw a missed call from a number she didn't recognize. Her heart jolted with both excitement and trepidation. At lunch, she ducked into an empty conference room. Hands trembling, she redialed. A woman's voice answered, cautious and laced with suspicion. "Who is this?" "This is Mrs. Darrow. I'm Eli's teacher," she said softly. Are you Marissa?" The pause. "Yes. Is he okay?" Mrs. Darrow's heart pounded. She wanted to flood this woman with questions, but she remembered that Marissa might also be scared. He's safe at school. He came to my class a few days ago. I found your note in his phone. On the other end, a sharp intake of breath. Then Marissa's voice turned thick with emotion. I was afraid no one would ever find it. I put those notes in anything I could when they took him. But I never knew where he was placed. Tears prickled at Mrs. Darrow's eyes. She heard the sincerity in the woman's tone, felt the heartbreak. He's been so worried. He thinks you might call him on that phone, but it's not active. He's holding on to it? Marissa's voice wavered. I told him to keep it until he was safe, but it's not working, I know that. Oh God, you have no idea how hard it's been. I lost custody when I was sick. I had no place to live, no money, no attorney, everything fell apart. I tried to follow up, but they moved him across counties. Every time I called the agency, I was told it was confidential or that I had no rights anymore. Mrs. Darrow swallowed, tears threatening to spill. She felt for both mother and child. I'm so sorry. I'm going to do what I can to help. CPS has been notified, but your case might take time. Please don't lose hope. I believe you. A ragged sob came through the line, and then Marissa apologized. I'm sorry. It's just been so long. Please, just tell him I love him, that I never stopped looking. Mrs. Darrow promised, but she also knew that legally she couldn't go against the system. Still, what else could she do but try? After they ended the call, she typed up her notes, saved the recording, and shared it with Ms. Shepard. The counselor was just as moved, pressing it upon the local CPS office. This time, the seriousness of the call forced them to recheck Eli's case. Reports of multiple foster placements, each disrupted. They interviewed Mr. Halston, who was outraged, brandishing documents to claim Eli was manipulative, had emotional problems, and lied frequently. He insisted the note was some fabrication or leftover from a disruptive influence. The social worker in charge seemed hesitant. They placed the investigation on a temporary hold, citing that they needed more substantial evidence. Mrs. Darrow nearly raged at the bureaucracy. Eli was the living proof of something wrong, but apparently that wasn't enough. Halston had his own set of logs, perhaps from agencies or from private therapists who had labeled Eli as a troubled child. She knew how these narratives could overshadow a child's actual experiences, especially in an overworked system. The idea that it might end here enraged her. Eli, meanwhile, sensed the turbulence. Ms. Shepard tried to keep him calm, but after the official interview with a CPS investigator, he became more withdrawn. He expected to be believed, for everything to be fixed. Instead, the grown-ups seemed to accept Halston's claims. One day after class, Mrs. Darrow found him alone, tears slipping down his cheeks while he sat by the classroom window. I told them, he whispered. I told them about my mom. But they said I wasn't telling the truth. His voice cracked on the last word, revealing how devastating it was for him to be dismissed. Mrs. Darrow kneeled by his side, guilt churning in her stomach. I believe you, she said, her voice trembling. Miss Shepard believes you too. This isn't over, Eli. Sometimes grown-ups take time to fix things, but we won't give up. He turned away, hugging that phone to his chest as though it were a living creature. Mrs. Darrow gently placed a hand on his back, relieved when he didn't pull away. She promised herself she would dig deeper, do everything she could. If Halston's record was squeaky clean, they had to find the hidden dirt. She refused to let the system fail this child. That night, she called Marissa again from a blocked number, hoping to get more detail. The woman answered, sounding breathless, as though living on a knife's edge. She explained in halting words how she had ended up homeless during an extended illness. She missed court dates because she'd been in the hospital. By the time she recovered, the custody case was closed. They placed Eli in foster care, and she'd been frantically calling agencies, hotlines, anyone who might help. But each time, she faced an impenetrable wall of paperwork and confidentiality. She had no stable address, which made it even harder. She'd recently found a small place to stay, a friend's couch, but the agencies rarely believed her story. Marissa's tears threatened to consume the conversation, but Mrs. Darrow guided her toward practical steps. She urged her to document everything, to keep any records of her hospital stay, missed court notices, anything that could prove her story. "I'll share them with Miss Shepherd," Mrs. Darrow promised, "and we'll give them to the CPS caseworker." The next few weeks turned into a blur of tense waiting. Halston's discontent became apparent. He visited the principal to complain that Mrs. Darrow was prying into his personal affairs. He threatened to request a new teacher for Eli, but the principal, a kindly older woman named Dr. Belling, refused to move the child mid-year without cause. Mrs. Darrow overheard Halston's raised voice in the office more than once, and her nerves frayed each time. But she clung to her convictions. If a caretaker was indeed harming or manipulating a child, she had an obligation to stand up for that child. One early morning, Mrs. Darrow arrived at school to find her classroom door slightly ajar. Inside, a few of her desk drawers had been opened, as if someone had rummaged through them. Nothing was stolen, but her heart pounded with suspicion. It might have been a random break-in, or a curious student. But she felt a chill, imagining Halston or someone working on his behalf, searching for any information she might have. She reported the intrusion to the principal, who promised to investigate, but the cameras in that wing had apparently malfunctioned. The timing felt too coincidental. Meanwhile, Miss Shepherd continued scheduling sessions with Eli. Slowly, he revealed more details. Halston was strict, which the child described as having to do extra chores for minor mistakes or being punished by isolation. 4 hours, he wasn't allowed to talk to anyone, or he'd lose privileges like dinner. Mrs. Darrow's stomach turned. Eli also shared that he'd been made to recite that his mother was a liar, a bad person who abandoned him. The child cried as he recounted how he tried to refuse, so Halston would lock him in a dark guest bathroom for entire afternoons. Ms. Shepherd documented everything, but they still needed proof. CPS needed something beyond a child's word, especially given Halston's record of problem kids. Ms. Shepherd quietly reached out to prior foster children who had lived with Halston. Most had long since been moved to different counties, but one, a teenage boy named Trevor, responded. He confirmed that Halston was psychologically abusive, strict to the point of cruelty. He had reported it once to a social worker, but apparently no official action was taken, and Trevor was then moved to another home. It became clear that there was a pattern. Yet, the official stance was that these were unsubstantiated allegations by children with emotional challenges. Mrs. Darrow felt rage smoldering inside her. The system that was supposed to protect them seemed paralyzed by Halston's neat record-keeping. Indeed, he had logs from each child's stay, detailing behavioral issues. He had references from neighbors praising his quiet, no-nonsense approach, and a few staff members from the foster agency who insisted he was a valued caretaker. All the while, Halston's interactions with Mrs. Darrow became more hostile. One afternoon, when he came to pick Eli up, he cornered her in the hallway. "I understand you've been meddling," he said, voice low, eyes cold. He was a large man, tall enough to tower over her. "I'd advise you to stop for your own sake." Mrs. Darrow's heart hammered. She stood her ground as best she could. "I'm just concerned for Eli's well-being," she said. "Eli is a troubled child," Halston snapped. "The sooner you accept that, the better for everyone." She met his gaze steadily. "I won't ignore behavior that suggests he's hurting." The tension crackled between them, thick as a thundercloud. Finally, Halston huffed and walked away, dragging Eli behind him. The boy threw a helpless look over his shoulder. Mrs. Darrow watched them go, determined not to flinch. Once she was alone, she felt her legs trembling so badly she had to lean against the wall. The confrontation only reaffirmed her suspicion that Halston was dangerous in ways official documents hadn't captured. Days bled into weeks, with Miss Shepherd and Mrs. Darrow working behind the scenes, speaking to the local CPS, pressing them to dig deeper. Bureaucratic delays kept the case from advancing quickly. Halston responded by tightening his grip on Eli. The child arrived at school with exhaustion etched on his face, sometimes with shadows under his eyes. He withdrew further from classmates, barely speaking in group discussions. When the phone on his wrist was occasionally glimpsed, his fear soared if anyone came near it. He rarely let it out of his grasp. Even during art class, he painted with one hand, the other carefully clasped around his phone. In the midst of it all, an unlikely ally stepped forward. A friend of Miss Shepard's worked for a non-profit legal clinic, offering pro bono services for family custody disputes. She contacted Marissa directly after hearing the recorded phone call. Marissa jumped at the chance. Over the following weeks, she gathered every piece of documentation she could find: medical records, discharge papers from the hospital, old court notices that had been mailed to a shelter address. The legal clinic volunteer, a junior lawyer named Marta, meticulously assembled Marissa's case. They petitioned for a formal re-examination of Eli's placement. Ms. Shepard and Mrs. Darrow provided statements of concern. Trevor, the teenage boy who previously lived with Halston, provided a written affidavit describing the household environment. It took time, but piece by piece, they built a more robust file. One quiet afternoon, Ms. Shepard called Mrs. Darrow into her office. "I just received a message from the caseworker. They've scheduled a hearing. They'll be reviewing Halston's foster license and evaluating if there's cause for removal of Eli." Mrs. Darrow's heart soared and sank all at once. So many times the system had let kids down, so she refused to celebrate too soon. Yet this was progress. She found the boy after class, gently pulled him aside, and told him something might be changing soon. She couldn't promise, but she assured him they were fighting for him. He only nodded, eyes shining with a glimmer of hope and dread. She wanted to hug him, but she settled for a comforting hand on his shoulder. "You're not alone," she whispered. "Remember that." 2 weeks later, the hearing date loomed. In that time, Halston's mood seemed to darken. Several teachers remarked on his abrupt manner, complaining that he snapped at them if they so much as asked about Eli's lunches. Miss Shepard suspected he felt the walls closing in, that he might sense an official inquiry was building. The day before the hearing, Mrs. Darrow saw Halston waiting in the parking lot earlier than usual, his posture stiff. When Eli emerged from the building, the boy paused to say a quick goodbye to his teacher. Halston barked, "Eli, move it." The child flinched so violently that Mrs. Darrow fought the urge to step between them. That night her phone rang. She glanced down at the caller ID, Marissa. She picked up, heart pounding. Marissa sounded breathless, but there was a note of hope in her voice. "Marta told me we might have a chance tomorrow. I'm terrified, but I'm ready to fight for him." "You've come this far," Mrs. Darrow assured her. "The hearing is a chance for your side to be heard. You're not alone in that room." Marissa's voice quivered. "Thank you for everything you've done. If I get him back, I swear I will never lose him again." Mrs. Darrow bit her lip. "He needs you. Just know that no matter what, we'll keep pushing. Don't give up." Neither of them mentioned the possibility that the hearing could go poorly, that the system might uphold the status quo. But they both felt the weight of that risk. The next morning, a subdued hush fell over the school. Word had spread among the faculty that Mrs. Darrow and Miss Shepard would be testifying at a closed-door session about a student's welfare. A substitute was called in for Mrs. Darrow's class. She and Miss Shepard rode together in Miss Shepard's car, hearts pounding. On the way, a drizzle tapped at the windshield, as if the weather itself were marking the gravity of the day. They arrived at a modest brick building that housed the county's Family Services Department. Inside, worn linoleum floors and pale fluorescent lights gave everything a sterile feel. They found Marta, the pro bono lawyer, pacing near a row of plastic chairs. She wore a neat navy suit and clutched a binder stuffed with papers. When she spotted them, she broke into a small smile. "Glad you're both here. Thank you for coming." "We're prepared to say whatever is needed," Miss Shepard assured her. Marissa emerged from the bathroom, looking nervous but determined. She wore a simple blouse and slacks, her hair combed neatly, and carried a file of her own. When she saw Mrs. Darrow, tears filled her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered, stepping forward to clasp the teacher's hand. "Just, thank you." Mrs. Darrow squeezed her hand. "We'll do our best." Indeed, that was all they could promise. Shortly, they were called into a small hearing room with a long table, a few chairs lined against the walls, and a panel of officials at another table. Halston was already there, flanked by a stern-faced man in a sharp suit. His attorney, presumably. Eli was not present. The official process didn't require him to attend. Mrs. Darrow took a seat across from Halston, feeling her stomach twist at the glare he threw her. His presence felt oppressive even across the room. The hearing began in a formal, subdued manner. The lead caseworker reviewed the reason for the hearing, summarizing concerns raised by Ms. Shepard and Mrs. Darrow, along with the new evidence from Trevor's affidavit. Halston's lawyer objected to the affidavit's legitimacy, claiming Trevor was a disgruntled teen. Marta countered with a calm argument about patterns of emotional isolation in Halston's home. Marissa, trembling at first, found her voice and described the events that led her to lose custody. She recounted her battles with illness, her desperate attempts to locate Eli, and the notes she'd hidden in his belongings. Mrs. Darrow's testimony came next. She spoke of Eli's extreme anxiety, how he feared losing the phone, how he said it was the only link to his mother. She recounted the meltdown over the phone dropping, the day he was terrified during the storm, and how he apologized compulsively for everything. She didn't mince words about his bruised spirit, his trembling posture, or the abject terror he displayed at the thought of having his phone or backpack touched. "I believe," she concluded, her voice thick with emotion, "that he's been living in constant fear. And I believe that fear is tied directly to his foster environment." When Ms. Shepard took the floor, she skillfully presented her own observations. The therapy sessions where Eli revealed punishments, isolation, and being forced to disavow his mother. She explained how these were classic signs of emotional abuse. Halston's lawyer tried to discredit her, pointing out that other professionals once labeled Eli manipulative. Ms. Shepard calmly responded that such labels were the reason children in trauma often went unheard. The tension in the room rose steadily. Halston spoke in his own defense, voice dripping with contempt. "These allegations are nonsense. The boy has had issues in every home he's been in. I gave him structure and discipline. Any tears or tantrums are because he doesn't like rules. This teacher and counselor have meddled, putting ideas in his head. And this so-called mother." He cast a scornful glance at Marissa. "She gave him up in the first place." Marissa let out a choked sob, and Marta rose to protest the insult. The hearing official allowed Halston to finish, but his accusations lacked the ring of truth to those who had seen the evidence. Even so, the system rarely pivoted on emotion alone. Mrs. Darrow clutched her hands together, praying that the officials recognized the pattern of psychological abuse hidden beneath the veneer. After hours of back and forth, the panel adjourned to deliberate. The tension in the waiting area was thick enough to slice with a knife. Ms. Shepard paced, Marta flipped through her notes for the 10th time, Marissa sat in a chair, head in her hands. Mrs. Darrow stared at the clock on the wall, replaying every word of her testimony. Halston stood on the far side of the hallway, shooting occasional glares at them. His lawyer fiddled with his phone, expression unreadable. Finally, they were called back into the hearing room. The lead official addressed Halston and stated that, pending further investigation, his foster license would be suspended. Eli would be removed from his home and placed into temporary care with a different foster family. They also announced their intention to re-examine Marissa's case for potential reunification, given the new evidence that she had been medically incapacitated when custody was lost. Halston's lawyer barked a protest, but the official firmly stated that the pattern of allegations, combined with documentary evidence and the mother's new stability, merited further review. Halston stormed out in fury, ignoring his lawyer's attempts to calm him. Mrs. Darrow felt relief break over her like a wave. Marissa burst into tears, covering her face. Even Ms. Shepard, who tried to remain composed, sagged with exhaustion, tears in her eyes. Marta placed a hand on Marissa's shoulder, whispering, "This is just the first step, but it's a big one." That afternoon, they discovered that CPS agents had already contacted Halston's home and arranged for Eli to be picked up, effective immediately. The boy's belongings would be moved to a temporary care placement. Marissa hugged Mrs. Darrow tightly, voice trembling with relief. "Thank you for believing me. Thank you for looking out for my son." Mrs. Darrow could hardly speak, tears shining in her own eyes. "He's a wonderful child. He deserves a chance to heal." The next day at school, an official from CPS escorted Eli away from Halston, who was forced to surrender the child's personal effects. When the boy arrived in Miss Shepard's office, The social worker gently explained that he wouldn't be living with Halston anymore. Eli blinked in shock, tears threatening to fall. "But what does that mean?" he asked, voice trembling. "It means you're somewhere safer," Miss Shepherd said softly. "And there's a good chance you'll see your mother again soon." Eli's expression went through a spectrum of disbelief, hope, and fear. "Really?" he whispered. Mrs. Darrow appeared in the doorway, offering him a gentle smile. He clasped that old flip phone in his hand, as though it had magical powers. Slowly, for the first time, he gave them a shaky but genuine grin. "She's not giving up on me, right?" "Never," Mrs. Darrow replied, tears gathering. "She never did." It took weeks more for the legal wheels to fully turn. CPS, still cautious, did not place Eli with Marissa immediately. Instead, they opened a new case to verify her living situation, her health, her ability to provide for him. Marissa's pro bono lawyer assisted every step of the way. Ms. Shepherd provided statements attesting to Marissa's improved stability and the progress she had made. During this period, Eli moved to a different foster family, one that Ms. Shepherd knew personally, people known for being nurturing and supportive. With Ms. Shepherd's help, Marissa was granted supervised visits every weekend at a local community center. Mrs. Darrow often attended, offering moral support. She witnessed mother and son tentatively bridging the gap that time and separation had created. Eli remained guarded at first, but when he finally let himself lean into his mother's embrace, tears streaming down both their faces, it was a sight that made Mrs. Darrow's heart swell with joy. Halston appealed the suspension of his license, but a deeper investigation uncovered multiple accounts from former foster children who felt bullied and isolated under his care. Those stories, combined with evidence that he systematically enforced emotional abuse, was enough for the agency to stand firm. His license was revoked permanently, and a broader inquiry into the oversight procedures began. While some speculated that Halston might face criminal charges for child endangerment, the system often was slow to enact such steps. Still, the immediate threat to Eli was gone. During those transitional weeks, Mrs. Darrow and Eli found a fragile sense of normal in the classroom. He opened up a bit, laughing at classmates' jokes, showing more of his artistic side. He drew elaborate landscapes with hidden doorways and mysterious forests. When asked what they meant, he shrugged, but with a small smile that hinted at a budding sense of freedom. The phone, however, remained strapped to his wrist, a last vestige of the old fear, until one day he left it in his backpack for an entire morning without checking it. Mrs. Darrow noticed, but she didn't comment. She knew it was part of his healing process, learning to trust that he was safe. Finally, after Marissa's situation was fully verified, a supervised trial placement was approved. Eli would go live with his mother for a period, monitored by social services to ensure the environment was stable. The day the approval came through, Ms. Shepherd found Mrs. Darrow in her classroom, announcing it with a grin. "He's going back to her, starting next week." Mrs. Darrow's eyes welled up. "He must be so happy." Ms. Shepherd nodded. "He is. Nervous, but happy." The following week, a series of official forms and sign-outs took place, and then the day arrived. Eli was to be picked up by his mother after school to move into her small but welcoming apartment. Mrs. Darrow lingered at the doorway, scanning the hallway for Marissa. When she arrived, wearing a tidy outfit and carrying a brand-new backpack for Eli, Mrs. Darrow could barely contain her emotions. She saw Miss Shepherd standing a short distance away, smiling through tears. Eli stepped out of the classroom, his old backpack on one shoulder, phone in his hand. When he spotted his mother, he stood still for a moment, absorbing the reality. Then he ran to her, and she sank down, arms wide, wrapping him in a hug that spoke of every lost moment regained. Mrs. Darrow and Miss Shepherd hung back to give them space. The air seemed charged with a hopeful energy. They parted eventually, tears streaking both their faces. Eli turned to wave at Mrs. Darrow and Miss Shepherd. His eyes, for once, sparkled. "I get to go home," he said. "Really home." Marissa smiled up at Mrs. Darrow, gratitude shining in her eyes. "I'll never forget what you did," she whispered. Mrs. Darrow managed to nod. "He's a special boy. He deserves it." Soon enough, they left hand in hand, heading for the car. Miss Shepherd squeezed Mrs. Darrow's shoulder. "We did good," she said. "He's with her now, where he belongs." That weekend and the weeks that followed passed with a sense of quiet triumph. Now that Halston was out of the picture, Mrs. Darrow could reflect on everything that happened without the constant tension of wondering if something more ominous might occur. She still kept in touch with Marissa, checking in occasionally to see how Eli was adjusting. The mother reported that things were going well, albeit with the usual bumps of reacquainting themselves to living together. The child's night terrors had lessened, and he was slowly learning to trust that no one would take him away again. Eventually, Miss Shepherd let Mrs. Darrow know that Marissa's final hearing came and went, awarding her full custody under a supervision order. It was a moment of pure relief, an official end to the looming uncertainty that had haunted them for so long. On Monday morning, several weeks later, Eli stepped into the classroom with a bright expression that Mrs. Darrow had never seen on him before. He wasn't hugging his backpack. His phone wasn't on his wrist. Instead, he held it in his hand. When he approached her desk, she saw that he was almost shy about it, but in a happy way. "Mrs. Darrow," he said quietly, "I wanted to give this to you." He held out the old flip phone, battered and scratched. For a moment, she was speechless. "Oh, Eli, you don't have to." He offered a tiny grin. "I don't need it anymore," he said. "She knows where I am now. So I don't have to wait for her to call." His eyes shone with the realization that he was finally, truly safe. "You can keep it, or maybe just do whatever you want with it. But I don't want it anymore." Mrs. Darrow gently took the phone from him, her throat tight. "Thank you," she managed. "I'll always take care of it. And I'm so proud of you." He nodded, a faint blush in his cheeks. Then he turned, heading for his desk with an air of calm. Mrs. Darrow found herself tracing the cracks on the phone's plastic surface, thinking of all it had represented: fear, longing, a lifeline to a mother he couldn't reach. Now it was just a relic of a painful past, no longer needed. She set it in a drawer, unsure of what she would do with it, but certain it deserved to be kept as a reminder of how courage, compassion, and perseverance could bring about a child's salvation. After class, she found Miss Shepherd in the hallway and showed her the phone. Miss Shepherd exhaled in amazement. "He gave it to you? That's huge. It means he trusts everything is okay now." Mrs. Darrow nodded. "It's the best gift he could have given." They shared a moment of quiet gratitude. The battle had been long, the system slow and sometimes unjust, but for once, the outcome was right. Eli was home with his mother, free from the oppressive environment that had stolen his sense of safety. They had done what every teacher and counselor hopes to do: protect a child who can't protect himself. Eli continued in Mrs. Darrow's class for the rest of the year. His artwork blossomed, his friendships expanded. Though he was still a reserved boy, there was a new openness, a willingness to talk about his interests. Marissa appeared regularly for parent-teacher conferences, always beaming when she heard about his progress. Over time, Miss Shepherd noticed that some of Eli's coping behaviors faded. He no longer startled as badly at thunderstorms. He no longer apologized compulsively for accidental bumps or mistakes. He was healing step by step. At the end of the school year, the principal recognized Mrs. Darrow and Miss Shepherd quietly in a small ceremony among staff, thanking them for their dedication. They both felt a surge of pride, even if they remained humble about it. They knew the real reward was seeing Eli smile without worry creasing his forehead. Summer arrived, and with it came the scattering of students off to camps, vacations, or simply a few months of freedom. Mrs. Darrow spent some of the break visiting her sister in the countryside, reading novels, and preparing for the next round of students. But every so often, her mind drifted back to that phone in her drawer. She would pull it out, run a finger over its battered exterior, and remember the look on Eli's face, the child who had once believed his mother might call if he was ever safe. In a way, that call did come, but not through any cell tower. It came through the love and persistence of people who cared enough to stand up for him. Shortly before the new school year began, she received a surprise invitation from Marissa to attend a small celebration of family at a local park. She wasn't sure what to expect, but she accepted gratefully. When she arrived, she saw a small gathering of neighbors, Miss Shepherd, Marta the lawyer, and a few others who had helped with the case. Eli was there, offering them cups of lemonade, wearing a bright grin. When he handed her a paper cup, she saw the faint remnants of old worry in his eyes, but overshadowed now by a quiet joy. Marissa raised a toast. Her voice trembled when she thanked everyone for bringing her son back. She ended it by saying, "People say the system is broken, and maybe it is, but it's made of people. Sometimes, it only takes a few good ones to do the right thing. That's all we needed." Everyone clinked cups, smiling or wiping tears. Mrs. Darrow felt the emotion swell in her chest, a mixture of relief and gratitude. Eli caught her eye and gave a playful wave. He seemed lighter, free from the weight that once hounded him. In that moment, she truly believed in the power of compassion to break even the bleakest cycles. Finally, as the sun dipped low in the sky, painting the park in hues of gold, Mrs. Darrow said her goodbyes. She hugged Marissa, who whispered a final, "Thank you," tears shining. She waved at Eli, who returned the wave enthusiastically before dashing off to play with another child. It warmed her heart to see him acting like any ordinary kid, laughing and running, unburdened by fear. She walked back to her car with Miss Shepherd, who breathed deeply of the summer air. "Sometimes," Miss Shepherd said, "I wonder if we can keep doing this job. You see so many children slip through the cracks. But then you see something like this and it makes it worthwhile." Mrs. Darrow nodded. "It reminds us what we're fighting for." They parted ways, each carrying that sense of fulfillment. At home, Mrs. Darrow set the battered phone on her desk in a place of honor. She couldn't bring herself to dispose of it. It stood for the lengths a mother would go to reach her child. It stood for a boy's unwavering hope in that mother's promise. It stood for a teacher's responsibility to dig deeper, and a counselor's expertise in guiding children through trauma, and a volunteer lawyer's dedication to justice. Time passed and life carried on. Mrs. Darrow welcomed a new group of students in the fall, an energetic bunch with their own stories and challenges. She immersed herself in lesson plans, parent conferences, the daily tasks of shaping young minds. Yet, every so often her phone would buzz with a text or a call from Marissa, giving an update on Eli. "He's painting a mural on his bedroom wall," she'd say. "He drew a picture for his friend's birthday." Or, "He asked me if we could adopt a cat." Each snippet brightened Mrs. Darrow's day. And whenever Miss Shepherd asked if she'd heard from them, Mrs. Darrow smiled and said, "Yes, they're doing fine," and felt the echo of satisfaction that sprang from knowing she had made a difference. By winter, Miss Shepherd told her that Halston's final appeal had been denied. He would never again be allowed to host foster children. They learned that an internal review was launched within the agency to prevent future oversights. Though the wheels of institutional change turned slowly, it was a start. At least the immediate danger to vulnerable children had been removed. Eli visited the school once in the spring, accompanying Marissa when she volunteered at a book fair. He bounded up to Mrs. Darrow, wearing new sneakers and carrying a stack of art books. "Look," he said excitedly, flipping through pages of famous paintings. "I love Monet's water lilies. I think I'm going to try painting something like that." Mrs. Darrow smiled. "I can't wait to see what you create." He beamed and showed her a small collage of sketches. The phone was nowhere in sight. When she asked if he missed it, he shrugged, a gentle smile curling his lips. "I don't really need it anymore. Now if I want Mom, I can just call her on her new phone. We even have matching cases." A small giggle escaped him. "Things are different now." She ruffled his hair gently. "I'm so happy for you," she said, voice soft. By the end of that day, after the book fair concluded, Marissa lingered to chat with Mrs. Darrow. "He sleeps better now," she confided. "He told me that for a long time, he thought if he lost that phone, he'd lose me forever. But now he knows I'll always be here." She squeezed Mrs. Darrow's hand. "And I owe so much of that to you." Mrs. Darrow felt tears threaten. "I just did what anyone should do," she said. Marissa smiled. "Then maybe we need more people like you in the world." They parted ways, and Mrs. Darrow returned to the quiet halls of Larkspur Elementary. Her footsteps echoed with a warm sense of accomplishment. In every corner of that building, memories of her struggle for Eli lingered. The place where Oliver tripped over that pencil box, the cafeteria corner where Eli once hid, the desk where he used to brace himself every time thunder struck. All of it was etched into the fabric of that year. And though she couldn't rescue every child from every sorrow, this time, she had won a victory. As the months and then years passed, the memory of that battered flip phone never faded. It remained in her drawer, a testament to the fact that hope can exist even in old, broken things. The real call that brought Eli home wasn't about technology. It was about the unwavering love of a mother who refused to give up, and the compassion of those who believed a child's cries for help. At times, Mrs. Darrow thought back on how close everything came to falling apart, how easily the note could have been missed, how close the system came to dismissing the allegations. It reminded her that justice, while slow, was possible. That children like Eli needed vigilant advocates who were willing to risk trouble, to question those in power, to keep searching when things didn't add up. And so his story had a happier ending than most, culminating in that final day he approached her and held out the phone, quietly declaring he didn't need it anymore. Because now his mother knew exactly where he was. Safe at home, exactly where he belonged. Thank you for watching, and if you believe in sharing the truth and standing up for those who need a voice, don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories like this. We appreciate your support.